What's up, family? So, my next guest is a writer, an activist. She's an associate professor at Teachers College, Columbia University, and the author of the new book, Love from the Vortex. My next guest is none other than Dr. Yolanda Sealey-Ruiz.
Hello.
Hello there. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
Durell, we just met, but you are a blessing. You are brilliant, and I am grateful.
Well, thank you so much. So I want to talk about a little bit of how you first came into my life. So the first time I heard your name was actually from a really good friend of mine that works within the arts and cultural industry in New York City.
Huh.
His name is Gary Padmore. I'll go ahead and give a shout out to Gary.
Oh,
Yes. He asked me, he's like, have you ever heard the name Dr. Yolanda Sealey-Ruiz? And I was like, no, I'm not familiar. Could you tell me a little bit more about it? And then he went on to tell me about this amazing professor who's also doing some incredible consulting work specifically around equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I went, okay, really awesome. I'll look her up. Fast forward literally to the next day, I take my very first class at Teachers College, and your name is everywhere. And I was taking a class with Dr. Emden. So I started getting into your work, watching old interviews. And I went, okay, I need to connect with her. I need to know more about her and who she is. And so I got so excited about it, but I went, I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't know. And the universe has worked its way out. And I am so humbled to have the opportunity to speak with you today. I cannot wait to fall into the vortex with you.
Durell, oh my gosh. What does one say after that beautiful, heartfelt testimony? I mean, brother, thank you. I am honored. I am humbled that you reached out to me in the way that you did. And I'm just grateful for this time that we're sharing right now.
For those who may not be familiar with you or your work, tell us a little bit about your origin story.
The Bronx raised me, and I came of age in a time square in the middle of the immersion and emergence of hip hop right there in the South Bronx. I talk a lot about the blessing, and we don't realize it, or you don't realize that you're in the middle of making history when you're doing it. You know, it's always after the fact that you realize, wow, that was a very dope historical moment. But Adrian of the Cold Crush Brothers, they don't really get the recognition they deserve, but they were really the first commercial type of hip hop group that came certainly out of the Bronx. Adrian still does amazing work right now in the fields of health. So he does a lot of work around hip hop health. Just a beautiful brother. And then not far away, you know, there was KRS-One on Webster Avenue, often giving free jams. Grandmaster Flash would frequent the neighborhood. So we didn't realize it, but we were square in the middle of these folks who would become icons. And so not just in terms of hip hop raising me, but just really the beauty and the pain of the Bronx. The Bronx is still considered the forgotten borough because we were mostly a community of tenement buildings and projects. There weren't private homes the way that they are now. So there was really no tax dollars, right, that we were paying that would be invested into the schools, the way that schools are structured. And so there was a lot of inequity, but that's not the full story. You know, we were an incredible community who loved each other and knew we were creative. We knew we were amazing, even when the world told us or tried to tell us something different. So the Bronx is my hometown.
That moment when you realize you're in the presence, and even though this is virtual, but you're in the presence of a goddess, and you just have to take a moment and go, you warm my soul in such an authentic way. It's just, I can't really even articulate it very well, although you do in your book. Let's talk about that a little bit. What was your journey like in the arts? When did you first fall in love with words and poetry?
I want to say that's an easy one. And that would have to be Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou taught me how to write because, believe it or not, many of us were given this reality. We were put in remedial math, we were put in remedial English. So at some point in my life, although high school I did relatively well, but when I got to college, clearly my professors didn't think that I wrote so well. And so I remember going back to I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings, which is something that I read in high school to teach me how to write, so to speak. So I began to read that novel in terms of when Maya used periods. When did she pause? When did she use a semicolon? And so I studied that book over and over and over as a model for writing. And so I first came to really understanding my writing voice through Maya, and then certainly through her poetry, and she has that kind of trilogy of her autobiography, and then all of the beautiful poetry books that she's written. And then I would have to say a huge influence was June Jordan, Alice Walker as I got older, and really the women, these Black women poets, Black women poets of the 70s. I remember getting the book Words of Fire and just not even knowing some of these women, and they were just spitting fire into Zaki Shange, for colored girls. That choreo poem shifted my world. So I didn't recognize myself as a poet, believe it or not, Durell, until 2018.
No way.
Although I've been writing poetry since I was 15. TC asked me to write an inaugural poem for their new president. And when the gentleman asked me, I said, "Are you sure? Me?" He said, "Yes." And I had forgotten that I'd said in passing to him, "Oh yeah, I write poetry." And wonderful friend, James Gardner. And then that was it. Within, I think about 2 weeks, I had to come up with this original poem. And Durell, I didn't even carry the reality that I was about to share this poem in front of like 1,400 people. It never occurred to me. I was just in the mode of, who is this man? What is this institution? What is my experience here? And what do I want to say? And after that, and getting such beautiful reception from it, I started saying, okay, well, I've read to 1,300 people. I guess I'm a poet.
Right now, we're seeing a lot of performative justice through statements that institutions are putting out, be it nonprofit, philanthropy, academia. As a writer, someone who really values words and the written word especially, I would love to get your take on these performative justice statements that we see people or institutions putting out.
If it's fake, if it's not from the heart of the organization or the heart of the institution, it will be exposed and we won't be surprised. However, if it is the trajectory that they're going to and they're trying to find a way to sustain it, then we welcome it. And then they will find networks of people that will help to encourage them to continue to do this work in a deep way. To answer the question is to say only time will tell, and time doesn't lie.
And that really makes me think about current events. To be clear, it's not the first time that a Black woman has been running as vice president in this country, but the first time that a Black woman has been running as vice president on a major party ticket. I thought it would be great to get your take on just how magnanimous this moment really is, considering everything else that's going on in the country.
It was phenomenal. The fact that she is this Black woman, and a beautiful Black woman, who embraces her Indian heritage as much as she embraces her Black heritage, this is a phenomenal moment. So this is a very, very historic moment, as historic as it was for Barack. It is historic, particularly for women. And, women have really, I think in this last year or two, collectively kind of exploded onto the scene with their voice. And they're not having it. We are not having it. And so to have Kamala in this moment where you see women rising in the way that they are in Congress and in the streets, This is a historic moment. We are shaping history now. And I'm excited to be I hope that I'm a worthy witness.
So let's maybe get into the book a little bit. It's difficult because once we fall into the vortex, it's very hard to come back out of it. So again, we do not have to go in any sort of order. This was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, to try to curate 3 poems that I felt one gave a good sense of the breadth, but also the depth of the work. This was very difficult. And I mean, much like how you articulated earlier, I was raised on these Black feminist writers as well. And you talk about standing or sitting on the shoulders of giants. I mean, who's going to come after you?
To answer that question, I don't even know, brother, if I'm qualified, because I'm so in the moment and so grateful to be in the moment of this moment with you, to be hearing how what I wrote from a very personal space has impacted you. And that when I hear other folks writing to me or calling me or texting me, telling me this book got them through the pandemic, I think I still need to sit with that. So who's behind me? I pray it's a boatload of folks behind me. But I just pray that they hold onto their voices, that they speak with vulnerability and humility and understand whose shoulders they're standing on. Page 152, you have the book. Here is my invitation for you to bend towards justice. My arc of self bends in favor of love. Asking hard questions and waiting for answers that don't offer conclusions, just more wonderings about how to live a life worthy of the children who come after us.
Yeah. When I asked that question originally, I wasn't necessarily thinking about the poems. I also wanted to hear, but I mean, there couldn't have been a better segue into that. Thinking about our future, and you're thinking about our future in such a deep and profound and radical way that I think you talk about us being here, as we were ripped away, as our ancestors were ripped away from their homeland. We've been here now for over 400 years. And I think about what that first generation of my ancestors went through, and then the second and third generation of what they went through, and the fact that we are still here, and their ability to endure so we could have this conversation today. If they were to put that in a poem, I do believe that would have been just us.
Oh my goodness, Durell. Sister Billy Sankofa she sent this piece, and I'm not going to try to paraphrase it because I don't want to mess it up. But the gist of it was, she went by generation, the current generation that we're in, and she counted all the way back. And she said, for you to be here to survive, you would have to have had 4,957 ancestors to survive in order for you to exist. That just gave me chills.
There is a palpable electricity right now throughout the country and around the world. But in our country, particularly in the Black community, we have to be able to simultaneously sit with this idea of radical feedback and also radical love. I think the one thing Black men do not have to worry about is whether or not Black women are going to love them. And we have the receipts to prove that.
Wow, Durell. Yeah, that was beautiful and true. And we just want our brothers to be worthy witnesses of that love. Whether it be our sons, our nephews, our lovers, or biological brothers, brothers in arms. Just be worthy witnesses, because that love doesn't come cheap. I will wait patiently on the love I deserve. I am going to believe it can happen. It will not be a love that requires work. This love will move when I am still, speak when I am quiet, stand when I am falling. This love will welcome me with outstretched arms and whisper, I have been here, patiently waiting for you and this moment to arrive. Waiting room.
At the time when I was sort of thinking about the poems I would like to hear you recite, I selected a piece from Angel, chapter titled Angel. And you did mention in that Angel was your ex. It's just, honestly, I could have chosen any poem out of here, but there's something about We Were Children. I feel like I spend a majority, not all of it, I definitely spend a majority of my adult life trying to get back to what it felt like when I was younger, when I was a child.
Mm.
And this poem took me right there. And so I knew it would help someone out there heal as well.
This particular poem, We Were Children, traverses 2.5 decades of being with my daughter's father. The first love of my life, true love of my life, and also facing a failure of marriage. So I will do my best, but here we go. We Were Children, page 33. Not even our bodies were fully formed. I was barely 15, you all of 19. There you stood in your manhood, young, underdeveloped, proud. And I appeared to you in my blossoming girlhood, doused with girlish ways and big dreams. The gravity of piano keys and percussion notes pulled us towards one another. I admired the way you looked, smiled, and was fascinated by the way you barely even noticed me. I knew that you would be my husband, but I did not know how. I knew even before I understood what marriage was, that we would be wedded together forever. The years ticked by. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and during that time, much was lost, much was gained, and much was lost again. We grew older, but somehow we always remained children in each other's eyes, never fully forming or moving towards the maturity that comes with adulthood. Sometimes stuck in arguments from the late 80s or the early 90s, when we were still in our teens and 20s, holding on to what had not been resolved. Somehow never being able to find the courage, understanding, intellect, to solve our problems in the present or the past. We were children in so many ways. We didn't know any better. We only knew what was in front of us. We only knew that we tried to overcome the brokenness in our families and the racism of a society that looked at us and scowled. We only knew how to just be with each other in the moments that we were together. When storms hit, we didn't quite understand how to manage. Attacking each other, blaming each other, doing what children do on the playground, throwing sand in each other's faces, sticking out our tongues, and running away. In some ways, it was unfair that we met so early, I think. In another lifetime, we could have been best friends, soulmates. In another lifetime, forever could have been realized. But so much has happened in our time together, connected to our formative years, so much that we didn't have language for, so much we just couldn't understand. So we cried or we yelled through it until we got to the other side, only to realize that we had nothing to hold us together.
When I hear you read that poem, I think of two words: radical acceptance. You have an emotional intelligence that far exceeds anything, any assessment that any academic institution could come up with to really measure just how brilliant a person is. I read that and I think back to my first love, and I go, or my first relationship, let me just say that, and I go, you know what? It's okay. You really did the best you could do given all the things that you have been given at that time. And you have given me through that poem, but really through the whole entire book of Love from the Vortex, you have given me permission to forgive my former self. And that is where the healing starts. It's where it starts. It's not where it finishes or where it ends. But that is where it starts. And it cannot begin until you do that.
Yes, Durell. I feel like this is church. Amen and ashe. I was saying last night to a beautiful group of about 600 people, I said, you're either going to be an equity warrior or a status quo warrior. There's no neutrality. There's no neutrality. And as Sister Audre Lorde told us, your silence will not protect you. So don't think you're going to be in a meeting and you're just not going to say anything and that's going to protect you. No, that's you signing on to the status quo.
How can people keep in contact with you or keep up with you in your work and see what's next?
Yes. We'll tell you what's next really quickly on that audio book, which will be released by Audible.
Yes.
A bonus track. And the bonus track is from the new work I'm working on called The Peace Chronicles. Yes. And I'm 40 poems in. It's still messy. But I'm 40 poems in. So all of that in time will be announced, even the launch of the audiobook, which will have an online listening party and the whole nine. You can, follow me on social media. Twitter is @Ruiz Sealey. And Facebook, Yolanda Sealey-Ruiz. Instagram, Yoli_Sealey-Ruiz. I have a couple of names. Some names from childhood too. And then I have a website, YolandaSealey-Ruiz.com. And any of those spaces will let you know what's happening at any given time, not just around Love from the Vortex or the Peace Chronicles that's coming, but the work that I continue to do in the world, the talks that I'm doing with colleagues and on my own. So I'd love to hear from any of you. Please drop me a line, and I do write back.
And please go out now if you have not already. Well, actually, you probably can't go out because we're still sort of quarantined. But go to Amazon. Please do yourself and your loved ones a favor and pick up a copy of Love from the Vortex. You will not regret it. And if nothing else, your future self will thank you for it. And my present self thanks you so much for coming on today. And thank you for being so vulnerable. Thank you for being a goddess who is willing to share your wisdom and your light with the world. And hopefully in doing that, you're unconsciously giving many other goddesses as well permission to do the same. And that's what the world needs to hear.
Namaste and Ashe.
Ashe.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
You see me with someone new.